My name is Maren Whitlock, and I was 34 years old when my mother ended our family with a text message. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon in Raleigh, inside a glass conference room, so cold my fingertips had gone numb around a paper cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. I was halfway through presenting a risk review for a commercial client when my phone lit up beside my laptop. Celeste Whitlock. My mother never texted during business hours unless she needed something fixed, moved, paid, explained, or hidden. For 5 years, I had trained myself to glance at her name the way a firefighter glances at smoke. This time, there was only one message. We're cutting all ties. Don't come around ever again. Everett found someone who actually believes in this family. I read it once, then again. No apology, no warning, no phone call. Just a clean little sentence dressed up like a verdict. 30 seconds later, my brother Everett sent his own message. Don't make this ugly, Mare. You were never built for loyalty. Across the table, my coworkers kept discussing debt ratios and exposure limits. Someone clicked to the next slide. The projector hummed softly. Outside the glass wall, an assistant carried a stack of folders past the room like nothing in the world had changed. I placed my phone face down. I did not cry. I did not excuse myself dramatically. I did not send a paragraph begging my mother to explain why the family I had spent years protecting had decided I was disposable. I simply stood, told the room I needed 5 minutes, and walked down the hall to my office. Once inside, I closed the blinds, locked the door, sat at my desk. Then I opened my laptop and logged into Whitlock Renewal Group's banking portal. If my mother had truly cut ties, then she had just given me the one thing I had never been brave enough to take for myself: a reason to stop being their safety net. Please subscribe to support the channel. I bet you're watching this video right now while lying down with your legs crossed, right? If that's true, type 3. If not, type 4. Let's see whether I got it right. Alright, enough talking. Let's begin the story. The banking portal loaded slowly, as if it wanted to give me one last chance to be the daughter I had always been. The one who paused before protecting herself. The one who imagined my mother's face before making any decision that might inconvenience her. But the message was still sitting on my phone, bright and final. And for once, Celeste Whitlock had given me something useful. She had put the severance in writing. Whitlock Renewal Group's dashboard opened in front of me. Operating account, payroll reserve, vendor payments, commercial credit line. The same clean boxes I had stared at for 5 years while trying to make disorder look stable. I clicked into the credit line first, because that was where my name lived. Not as a daughter, not as a partner, as collateral. Credit limit: $410,000. Available balance: $73,200. Pending draw request: $68,500. Required approver on draws over $25,000. Maren E. Whitlock. That last line was the only reason I still had access. Years earlier, when they needed my credit score and my signature, they had made me the required approver for large withdrawals, so the bank would feel safer. Back then, my father called it trust. My mother called it responsibility. Everett called it teamwork. Now it looked exactly like what it was: the last lock they had forgotten to change. I opened my mother's text, took a screenshot, and saved it as a PDF. The file name was plain enough to belong in any audit folder. Notice of severed business relationship PDF. My mother had meant to punish me. In banking language, she had created documentation. I moved to the Management tab and selected the option to suspend approval authority pending guarantor review. A warning box appeared, explaining that pending draws could be delayed, account activity could be restricted, and all parties might be required to verify authorization directly with the bank. For years, words like that would have made me hesitate. I would have pictured my father pacing, my mother crying, Everett accusing me of sabotaging him. I would have heard their panic before I trusted my own judgment. This time, I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. Pending. Draw suspended. guarantor review initiated. Then I submitted a formal demand to halt all future withdrawals using my approval authority until the bank verified the account relationship in writing. I attached Celeste's text, my identification, and a short note stating that Whitlock Renewal Group had notified me, in writing, that all personal and business ties were terminated. A confirmation email arrived less than a minute later. I sat back and read it twice. There was no shouting, no slammed door, no speech about betrayal, just a status change on a banking screen. And somehow, it felt like the first honest sentence my family had spoken in years. By the next morning, the first call had not come to me, and that told me more than any voicemail could have. At 8:12 a.m., I was standing in my kitchen, in the same blouse I had worn to work the day before, because I had fallen asleep on the couch with my laptop still open beside me. The coffee maker sputtered on the counter, slow and irritated, while my phone lit up with an email from Priya Nand at Cumberland Federal Bank. The subject line was simple: Guarantor verification issue, immediate review. I opened it with one hand braced against the counter. Priya's message was careful, professional, and stripped of emotion in the way bank language always is when something has gone very wrong. She wrote that a $185,000 bridge loan application had been submitted by Whitlock Renewal Group 2 days earlier. My name appeared as guarantor. An electronic signature had been attached. Because of the request I submitted the day before, the bank had paused the release of funds and begun enhanced verification. Then I saw the note that made the kitchen feel smaller. Priya had contacted Everett first. According to the verification summary, my brother told the bank I had approved the guarantee verbally and that the signature was just a routine family authorization. Routine, that was the word he chose for using my name on a debt I had never seen. There was an attachment beneath the email. It did not give me everything, but it gave me enough. The timestamp, the flagged email address, and a partial location marker from the signing session. The signature had been completed at 11:48 p.m. on Monday night. The access point traced back to Cary, where Everett lived. The confirmation email had not gone to my real address. It had gone to one that looked almost identical, except one letter was missing from my last name. I stared at the screen until the coffee stopped dripping. Everett had not misunderstood me. He had not assumed I would agree. He had not made some sloppy family business mistake that could be repaired with a nervous laugh and one of my mother's casseroles. He had built a false doorway with my name over it and walked through carrying a loan application. A few minutes later, Priya called. "Miss Whitlock," she said, "I need to confirm directly. Did you authorize your brother to sign or submit any guarantee documents on your behalf?" I looked at the coffee pot, at the quiet kitchen, at the ordinary morning, still pretending to be ordinary. "No," I said. "I did not." There was a pause while she typed. "My brother has been confusing my silence with permission his entire life," I added. "But no, I never approved it." And for the first time, someone outside my family wrote that down. I wish I could say that was the first time Everett had used my name to open a door he had not earned. It wasn't. The first time was quieter, softer, almost flattering, which is how the worst traps usually begin. It was the spring of 2020, when every family seemed to be sitting around kitchen tables pretending they had a plan. My parents invited me to dinner on a Sunday evening at their house in Apex, the one with the white porch swing my mother staged with pillows no one was allowed to sit on. I remember the smell of pot roast, rosemary, and lemon furniture polish. I remember my father wearing the clean flannel shirt he only wore when he wanted to seem humble. I remember Everett arriving 15 minutes late, sunglasses still on his head, talking loudly into his phone about market timing. Back then, Whitlock Renewal Group was still more idea than company. My father had been a contractor for most of his adult life. He knew old houses, joists, permits, bad drywall, the sound a floor made when water had been sitting under it too long. My mother had an eye for making rooms look expensive without spending much money. Everett had charisma. At least, that was what my parents called it when he talked over people and left them feeling lucky to be interrupted. I had numbers. That night, after dinner, my father cleared the plates, but left the wine glasses on the table. That was the first sign something was coming. Celeste placed a pale blue folder in front of me, with a bank logo clipped to the corner. "We have a chance to make this real," she said. Nolan leaned back and nodded, already playing the role of the reasonable man. Small commercial credit line. Nothing reckless, just enough to move on 2 properties before other investors grab them. Everett smiled at me like we were already partners. "You know how to speak bank, that's why this works." I opened the folder. $410,000. Revolving commercial credit. Personal guarantee. Required. My eyes moved through the terms automatically. Interest rate. Draw structure. Default language. Collateral. Guarantor exposure. My stomach tightened before my face changed. "This is a serious liability," I said. "I need time to review it." My mother's eyes filled before I even finished the sentence. Everett looked away then, like my hesitation embarrassed him, and Celeste noticed it immediately. "Marin," she said softly, touching my wrist. "This is family. We are not strangers asking for a favor." That was always how they did it. They made caution sound cold. They made boundaries sound like betrayal. For one dangerous second, I believed them. Not because the numbers made sense, because being needed can feel exactly like being loved when you have gone hungry long enough. I signed 2 weeks later. Not because the risk disappeared, and not because I suddenly believed the numbers were safe. I signed because my family knew how to make risk sound like love with better paperwork. Celeste called every other day to tell me how proud she was. Nolan left voicemails about legacy, second chances, and the kind of family that built something instead of complaining from the sidelines. Everett sent property listings at midnight with messages like, "This is the one that changes everything." For a while, I let myself believe them. Then came Thanksgiving of 2022, the night I finally understood what my role in the family really was. Celeste hosted, of course. She always hosted when she wanted witnesses. The dining room looked like something from a holiday catalog. Taper candles, linen napkins, gold-rimmed plates. She only brought out when she needed people to feel grateful. I arrived early with 2 pies from a bakery near my apartment, because even then, I was still trying to be useful in ways nobody could criticize. Everett showed up 20 minutes late, with an expensive bottle of bourbon, the kind he liked people to assume he could afford. He swept into the room already talking, already laughing, already making everyone lean toward him. During dinner, he told the table he had sold 19 seats to one of his real estate coaching webinars. 19 strangers had paid him to explain wealth, and my parents acted like he had rebuilt the economy with his bare hands. Nolan raised his glass. "To Everett," he said. "A man who sees opportunity before the rest of us do." Celeste's eyes shone. He has always had vision. Everyone smiled at him. I looked down at my plate and waited until the laughter faded. I had reviewed the company accounts the weekend before. 3 contractor payments were overdue, and the credit line was already brushing against its covenant limit. That alone should have been enough to pause. "We need to slow down on new acquisitions," I said carefully, "just until the draws are reconciled and the contractor balances are current." The room went quiet in that specific way families get quiet when one person tells the truth too early. Celeste set down her wine glass. "Marin, must you do this at dinner?" "I waited until after the toast," I said. "I'm trying to protect the business." "No," Everett said, leaning back with a small smile. "You're trying to make sure nobody enjoys success unless you approved it first." A few people laughed. Not loudly. That would have been easier to hate. This was worse, the soft little laugh people use when they want cruelty to pass as teasing. Nolan shook his head. "Your brother inspires people. You scare them." Celeste reached for Everett's hand across the table. "Some people lead with faith, honey. Others lead with fear." I sat there with mashed potatoes cooling on my plate, listening to my family turn my caution into a character flaw. That night, I learned the rule. Everett's dreams were investments. My warnings were insults. After that Thanksgiving, I stopped bringing warnings to the dinner table. I brought them to spreadsheets instead. That was the only place my concern could exist without being laughed at, softened, or turned into proof that I did not believe in my own family. Late at night, after my actual job was finished and my apartment had gone quiet, I opened Whitlock Renewal Group's books and tried to make sense of what everyone else kept calling momentum. At first, it looked like ordinary small business chaos. Missing receipts, lazy labels, folders named by people who thought final, new, was a filing system. My father had always been better with a hammer than a file cabinet, so I fixed what I could. I renamed folders, matched payments, built a cleaner ledger, sent reminders nobody answered until something bounced. Then the numbers changed shape. Everett's truck appeared first. $71,800, listed as field equipment. A truck could be business-related, technically, if it hauled tools, lumber, fixtures, something heavier than a laptop bag and a promise. But the description was too polished, and the mileage logs looked like they had been written in one sitting by someone trying to remember where work was supposed to happen. Then came Celeste's monthly reimbursements. $4,200 every month, labeled administrative support. I asked once what administrative support meant, and she told me, very gently, that women of my generation had forgotten how much unpaid labor mothers did for a family business. I almost apologized. That was how deep the training went. The invoices bothered me most. Different amounts, always vague. $7,500 for brand positioning, $12,300 for digital outreach, $18,900 for growth consulting. The vendor names changed, but the language sounded like Everett: big, shiny, impossible to measure. Whenever I requested contracts, he sent me voice memos instead. "You're choking the business, Mayor," he said in one of them. "You can't audit vision." No, but I could audit withdrawals. So I started saving everything. Bank statements, vendor lists, screenshots, email threads, canceled checks. Not because I had decided to expose them. Not yet. Back then, part of me still believed documentation could protect the family from its worst habits. One vendor name kept surfacing in different places, quiet enough to ignore and frequent enough to remember. Hollow Creek Strategies. I did not know what it meant yet. I only knew that every time I followed the money, it walked a little farther away from the business and a little closer to Everett. The numbers were not confused. They were confessing. Please subscribe to support the channel. I bet you're watching this video right now while lying down with your legs crossed, right? If that's true, type 3. If not, type 4. Let's see whether I got it right. Alright, enough talking. Let's begin the story. 3 days after my mother told me not to come around ever again, Hollow Creek stopped being a name in an old ledger and became the beginning of the end. The email arrived just after lunch, while I was sitting at my desk with a legal pad full of dates, amounts, and question marks. The sender was Tessa Rourke, the former office manager at Whitlock Renewal Group. She had left the previous winter, though Celeste always said it like a firing. Tessa got emotional, my mother told everyone. She was not aligned with the family vision. At the time, I believed half of that. Maybe less. Tessa had been sharp, practical, and impossible to flatter. Those were not qualities my family forgave easily. Her subject line made my hand go still on the mouse. You should have seen this a year ago. There was no greeting, no small talk. Just one paragraph. "Marin, I kept copies, because I knew one day they would blame you. I'm sorry I didn't send them sooner. Check Hollow Creek, check the reserve account. And do not call your mother before you read everything." Beneath it was a compressed folder. I downloaded it, opened it, and watched my screen fill with the kind of quiet evidence that does not raise its voice because it does not have to. Scanned checks, vendor setup forms, internal emails, invoice approvals with Everett's initials, a spreadsheet Tessa had built herself, clean and dated, tracking payments nobody had ever shown me. Hollow Creek Strategies LLC had been presented in our books as a marketing consultant, brand positioning, growth strategy, digital outreach, words designed to float above scrutiny. But the registration documents inside Tessa's folder told a different story. Everett had formed Hollow Creek 18 months earlier, using a P.O. box outside Sanford. The mailing address was not connected to any agency, consultant, or marketing firm. It was connected to him. I scrolled down the spreadsheet. $8200美元、11600美元、$6900美元、14750美元. Over 14 months, $96,400 had moved from Whitlock Renewal Group into Hollow Creek. Then I saw the second tab, Everett Legacy Reserve. For a moment, the words did not land. They just sat there on the screen, neat and obscene. Not contractor reserve. Not tax reserve. Not emergency operating fund. Everett. I leaned back slowly, feeling something colder than anger settle in my chest. This was not sloppy bookkeeping. It was not optimism. It was not my brother being impulsive with money again. It was architecture. They had built a tunnel out of the company, lined it with my credit, and named the exit after him. I sat with Tessa's folder open for almost an hour before I moved. Not because I did not know what to do next, but because some truths require a minute before they become actions. The numbers were there, the emails were there, Everett's initials were there, but beneath all of it was the part that still felt impossible to say out loud. They had planned for me to be left holding the debt. While I was staring at the spreadsheet, my phone began vibrating across the desk. Celeste. I let it ring until it stopped. Then Nolan. Then a blocked number. Then Everett. The silence they had demanded from me lasted exactly as long as their access to money did. By mid-afternoon, the tone had already changed. My mother's first voicemail was breathless and wounded, like she had discovered betrayal instead of committed it. Marin, I know what I said, but you know families say things when emotions run high. You cannot just freeze everything because your feelings are hurt. My feelings. Not the forged signature. Not the suspended loan. Not the money moving through Hollow Creek. My feelings were the emergency she wanted named. Nolan's message came next, lower and harder. You need to call the bank and tell them this is a misunderstanding. Conrad is asking questions. Do you understand what you are doing to us? I wrote Conrad's name on my legal pad and circled it twice. Conrad Haynes was the new partner my mother had mentioned in her text. A hard money lender with a smile too white and interest rates too high, from what little I had heard. He was supposed to be Everett's proof that they did not need me anymore. Apparently, Conrad needed me more than he had been told. Everett did not leave a voicemail. He sent an email, because he always became formal when he was scared. Subject: fix this today. You're blowing up a deal you don't understand. Conrad walks. We lose Carrie. If that happens, it's on you. Stop acting like a victim and release the hold. There it was again. Carrie. The big property. The miracle flip. The one they were going to buy with a bridge loan carrying my name, my liability, and none of my consent. I forwarded everything to Reese. He called. 5 minutes later. Do not answer them, he said. I wasn't planning to. I mean it, Maren. Don't argue with people who need you confused. I looked at Hollow Creek on my screen, at Everett's reserve account, at my mother's message still saved in the folder. For years, they had made chaos and called it family. This time, I was going to let the paperwork answer first. By Thursday night, I had stopped thinking of the folder as evidence and started thinking of it as a room I was about to make my family walk into. I stayed at my office long after the rest of the floor emptied. The cleaning crew passed once, then twice. The lights outside the glass walls dimmed to their overnight setting, leaving my reflection faintly layered over the city beyond the windows. I looked tired, not broken. There was a difference I was only beginning to understand. On the table in front of me, I arranged everything in order. Celeste's text, the guarantor's suspension, confirmation, Priya's verification email, the flagged bridge loan, the Hollow Creek registration, Tessa's spreadsheet, the payment history, the screenshots showing Everett's initials beside approvals he had no business touching. I did not arrange them for drama. I arranged them because sequence matters. In my work, people rarely confess in one large cinematic moment. They confess in patterns. A date here, a transfer there, a signature at the wrong hour. A vendor that exists only until someone asks who owns it. Reese arrived a little after 9, with his suit jacket folded over one arm and 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. He did not ask if I had eaten. He knew the answer. He set 1 cup beside me and looked at the table. "Are you sure you want them here?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I want them saying things in a room where I'm not alone." He nodded. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. Reese did not mistake fear for doubt. I opened my phone and stared at Celeste's last voicemail. She had moved from rage to pleading by sunset, which meant money had become a clock. They needed me before Conrad walked away completely. They needed me before Cumberland Federal turned a flagged application into something larger. They needed me before Everett's miracle property in Cary died on paper. For years, need had been the hook they used to drag me back. That night, I decided to use it as bait. I typed 1 message to my mother. "Come to my office tomorrow at 9. Bring Everett. We need to discuss the accounts." I did not mention Reese. I did not mention Tessa. I did not mention Hollow Creek, or the bank report, or the fact that I had already sent copies to a secure drive outside their reach. Celeste answered in less than 2 minutes. "Finally. I knew you would calm down." I read the words once. Then I placed my phone face down beside the files and took the first sip of cold coffee. They thought they were coming to get their daughter back in line. They had no idea they were walking into an audit. At 8:57 the next morning, I watched them step out of the elevator like people arriving for a negotiation they believed they had already won. Celeste came first, wearing a cream cardigan and the soft, wounded expression she used whenever she wanted strangers to assume she was the reasonable one. Nolan followed with a leather folder tucked under his arm, empty confidence disguised as preparation. Everett walked behind them in a navy blazer, sunglasses pushed into his hair, one hand already moving over his phone, as if the building itself had inconvenienced him. My mother saw me near reception and opened her arms. "Marin," she said, loud enough for the receptionist to hear. "Thank God. We have been so worried about you." I stepped back before she could touch me. "Conference room C," I said. Her arms lowered slowly. A flash of irritation crossed her face, but she swallowed it. She was still performing. They all were. I led them past the rows of desks, past people who knew me as careful and quiet, and probably had no idea my family was about to learn the difference between forgiveness and exposure. When I opened the conference room door, Reese was already inside, standing beside the long glass table with a closed file in front of him. Nolan stopped at the threshold. "Why is he here?" he asked. "This is a family matter." "No," I said, walking to the head of the table. "This is a liability matter." Everett gave a short laugh. "You brought your boyfriend to scare us?" Reese did not react. "That is Marin's counsel," he said evenly, "and you should sit down." The word counsel changed the air, not enough to humble them, but enough to make them careful. Celeste sat first, Nolan beside her. Everett dropped into the chair opposite me, with the theatrical boredom of a man trying not to look afraid. I connected my laptop to the screen. The wall lit up white, then sharpened into the first document. Bridge loan application, $185,000. Guarantor, Marin E. Whitlock. Everett's phone stopped moving. I looked at him, not at my mother, not at my father. Him. "Why did you sign my name on a loan I never saw?" The room held still. Everett blinked once. "I didn't sign anything. It was automated." I clicked to the next slide. Timestamp. Flagged email. Partial location marker. Verification notes. Then why did the bank trace the signing session to Cary? His jaw tightened. Celeste leaned forward. "Marin, this is exactly what we mean. You take ordinary business confusion and turn it into an attack." I clicked again. Hollow Creek Strategies, LLC. This time, Nolan looked down. And that was when I knew he had known. Nolan, looking down, did more than Everett's denial ever could. My father had always been the quiet one in the room, the man who let Celeste do the talking and Everett do the dreaming. For years, I had mistaken that silence for helplessness. Sitting across from him now, watching his eyes avoid the screen, I understood it for what it was. Permission. Everett shifted in his chair. Hollow Creek is consulting. You don't understand how modern acquisitions work. Reese opened the file in front of him and slid 3 envelopes across the table, one to each of them. You may want to read before saying anything else, he said. Nobody reached for them at first. So I spoke. The first envelope is confirmation from Cumberland Federal that my approval authority has been suspended and that no future draws can be made using my name without direct verification. The second is the bank's notice that the bridge loan has been flagged for suspected electronic signature fraud. Everett's face changed then. Not much, just enough. And the third? Nolan asked, his voice rough. The third is a preliminary referral package being prepared for the county fraud unit. Malcolm Greer is the investigator assigned to review the signature issue and the Hollow Creek transfers. Celeste's hand flew to her chest. You reported your own family? I looked at her carefully. No, I reported transactions. That is the same thing, she snapped. No, I said. That is what you taught yourselves to believe. Everett stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. This is insane. You're acting like I stole from you. I clicked once more, and the payment history filled the screen. Month after month, money moving out of Whitlock Renewal Group and into Hollow Creek, then into the reserve account with his name on it. You did, I said. Celeste's face crumpled, but not with shame, with fear. There was a difference. We only did this because Everett needed a chance, she said, voice trembling. You have a career, Marin. You have stability. Your brother has always needed more help than you. There it was. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. A philosophy. My stability was not something I had earned. It was something they believed made me easier to sacrifice. I reached into my bag and placed the office keys on the table. The sound was small, but everyone heard it. I'm done, I said. The company, the debt, the emergency calls, the family meetings where you decide what I can survive losing. All of it. Nolan whispered my name. I did not answer. Reese gathered the files. I stood, pushed in my chair, and walked out before they could turn one more confession into another request. 8 months later, I learned that some doors do not slam when they close. Some simply stop opening. The first few weeks were loud, from a distance. Celeste called from numbers I did not recognize. Nolan sent one email with the subject line, family name, as if reputation were something I had damaged by refusing to be buried under it. Everett tried once through Reese, offering what he called a mutual clarification if I would tell the bank I had misunderstood the signature issue. Reese answered for me in one sentence. My client will not revise the truth to make the defendants more comfortable. After that, the noise thinned. Conrad Haynes walked away from the Carey deal before the end of the month. Without the bridge loan, the property disappeared. Without the credit line, Whitlock Renewal Group could not float payroll, contractors, or the old debts they had been hiding under new promises. Hollow Creek became a question nobody in my family could soften with holiday words. Malcolm Greer's office moved slowly, but it moved. That was enough. I did not follow every filing. I did not drive past their house. I did not ask old family friends for updates disguised as concern. For the first time in my adult life, I let a disaster happen, without volunteering to be the emergency exit. My own life got quieter. Then it got bigger. In October, I was promoted to Director of Commercial Risk Review. My boss said I had excellent pattern recognition. I almost laughed, because pattern recognition was not something I learned in a conference room. I learned it at dinner tables, in softened insults, in the pauses before my mother asked for something she had already decided I owed. Reese and I moved into a small townhouse on the north side of Raleigh. Nothing flashy, nothing anyone would film for social media, but every bill had my name on it because I chose it. Every key opened a door I was allowed to lock. On Friday evenings, the kitchen smelled like garlic and clean wood, and nobody called to say a contractor needed paying by Monday. One night, I opened the blocked messages folder. There were dozens. Celeste pleading about forgiveness. Nolan accusing me of destroying what he built. Everett sending quotes about loyalty from a phone probably paid for with money he never earned. At the top was the first text. "We're cutting all ties. Don't come around ever again." I read it once more. Then I deleted it. For months, I had thought that message was the moment my mother abandoned me. But standing in my quiet living room, with Reese washing glasses in the kitchen and the porch light glowing over a house nobody could leverage against me, I understood it differently. For once, my mother kept a promise that saved me. She cut the ties. I just made sure they stayed cut. The lesson I took from Marin's story is this. Sometimes the people who call you selfish are only angry because you finally stopped being useful to them. Family is supposed to be a place where love is given freely, not withdrawn every time you set a boundary. Real love does not ask you to destroy your future, so someone else can avoid responsibility. Real love does not call your caution betrayal. It does not turn your stability into a reason to take more from you. For years, Marin believed that if she gave enough, fixed enough, paid enough, and stayed quiet enough, her family would finally see her. But some people do not recognize sacrifice as love. They recognize it as access. And when access becomes expected, your kindness can slowly become a cage. That is why boundaries matter. A boundary is not revenge. It is not cruelty. It is not hatred. A boundary is the moment you stop handing someone the knife and calling the wound loyalty. It is the decision to protect the life you worked for, even when people who benefited from your silence accuse you of changing. And maybe that is the hardest truth. Healing does not always feel like a happy ending at first. Sometimes it feels like silence after years of chaos. Sometimes it feels like deleting a message you once cried over. Sometimes it feels like locking a door and realizing peace has a sound. Marin did not lose a family that day. She lost the illusion that being needed was the same as being loved. And in that loss, she found herself. What would you have done if you were in Marin's place? Would you have opened the door again or kept it closed? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched something real in you, please like, subscribe, and stay with us for the next story.